and also those with speaking rights as well. And in due course, I'll let you know when we can facilitate that. And just to remind those councillors, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Gardy, and Councillor Deegan, and I think Councillor Rainey as well, connecting remotely, that to keep the cameras on. So I could ask you to put on your cameras and keep them on for the duration of the meeting. And if you do happen to leave at any point, just to remind you not to take part in the decision on that item. Thank you. So see you all online now. So members, item 1 on the agenda is apologies, if we have any. I have apologies here from Councillor Rainey and Thompson. Nobody else is indicating in the chamber here. Okay. And item 2 is declaration of interest. And Councillor McElduff.
Just looking at item 3, number 2, application number 2, LA 10 2018 0969F, probably should declare an interest as a member of the Strudel campus engagement stakeholder group.
Yep, that's fine, Councillor. We note that.
Wonder did he get them 5 words in the right order? Strudel campus stakeholder engagement group. I think that's it.
I think you did.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
I think that's perfect. No other declarations of interest. Item 3 then is to consider 4 files for decision by the Planning Committee. And the first is paper A, and that's application LA 10 2022 0062F. I'll ask Darren just to introduce the application.
Okay, members, so good afternoon. The first application then is LA 10 2022 0062. It's a full application by the council for paving, curbing, carriageway resurfacing, surface water drainage and lighting. Works at the New Street Key Lane car park in Enniskillen. The recommendation then is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 2 conditions. Just to get through the details then, members, on the screen then, this is the existing sort of car park layout. And as you can see, you've got the entrances coming in off the public road with the arrows, and the internal layout then as shown on the screen. The proposal then doesn't alter the exterior boundary of the car park, and there's no change to it. However, there are some changes internally. So the access that's currently coming in off a position A will be retained. You'll come in then and down a corridor, which you'll be able to then go left and right and go park a car. The wall that goes along the front of the site will be removed and replaced along the line of the pink line. I'll come back to that later on. So if we go up to B, so on the screen you can see there's an access there currently, and you can see coming in off the road. That will be removed, so there will no longer be a second access coming in off the public road there. That'll be closed off. So the main entrance to the park will be at A, and also an entrance at D. C will be retained as it is, and D as well will be retained as is. Sorry. So that's a photograph just of access A. So that'll be retained. There'll be some change to the orientation, the radius, and the internal layout, but it'll largely be retained. B is the one that will be closed off, so that access to slip in there will be closed, and you'll not be able to come in on that in that area. The C then is the exit. That'll be retained. And D then again, there's no change to that approach coming down for traffic on those in that road. Internally then, there's a variety of cycle stands, seats, bins, and guardrails that are commonly found now typical around the council area. So high quality design, and they'll be located throughout the car park. As I say, one of the issues is relation to the existing access at A, and that'll be realigned and reorientated. The wall that you can see there just above the yellow line, that's the existing wall, and then there's a small area of landscaping with a few trees in behind it. So that wall will be removed. And if you look at the inset drawing there, you can see there's a dotted black line. So that's the existing wall. That will be removed, and then the wall will be replaced back at the purple line. Now, I'm advised that the aim is to try and keep as much of that landscaping as possible, but I would be pessimistic about whether those trees can be retained. Even if they are to be removed, they're of no great significance to the site, and the loss is not something that would be overly concerned to the planning department. And I'm sure officers within the council will look at replacement planting if the trees cannot be retained. So the recommendation then is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 2 conditions.
Okay, members, and just at this point, I'd maybe ask Councillor Robinson to adjust his camera. Just seems, I've no doubt you're present, Councillor, but it's just picking up the.
I'm here, but I can't get the camera on.
No problem. It is on, but it's picking up. Picking up a printer, you know, just a minute. Just needs readjusted. Yeah, it's just facing the wrong way, Councillor. Okay, we'll get that addressed. I've been advised IT will just connect on there and address that. No problem. So Councillor Irvine?
Thanks. Have you sorted Councillor Robinson out, or has he sorted himself out? Yeah.
See you.
Councillor Robinson?
Go on, Ed. Continue on, Robert.
That's okay.
Continue.
I have nothing really for Darren. I know this scheme coming through, but that's not a prior knowledge of it, but I know exactly where it's located and the need for it. So I'm happy to go with the officer's recommendation to approve.
To approve, yeah. And Councillor Maguire?
Carly, thanks, Chair. Again, I'm happy to second that. This is a long-awaited resolution to an ongoing antisocial behaviour issue. That's not to say we've been informed of the planning application, but it is hoped that this will resolve the issues in about that Key Lane area. So happy to second, Gurmagat.
Okay, thank you. And is everybody in agreement?
Agreed, Chair.
All agreed, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, members. So moving on to application number 2. Yep, just it, yep.
So just to confirm, members, so LA 10 2022-0062, the application was recommended for approval for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 2 conditions. Members have granted planning permission subject to those 2 conditions.
Okay, thank you. Application 2 then is LA 10 2018-0969F. Darren will introduce it.
Speakers.
I should also advise we have speakers in this application. Miss Jennifer Morgan and Miss Karen McShane, and Mr. Matthew Brothers. So all in support of the application. So we will get an opportunity to bring these in to speak shortly, but first we'll introduce the application.
Okay, so application 2 then is LA 10 2018-0969. It's a full application by the Department of Education for proposed road widening and a variety of other works. They're listed there on the report, and the location then is at Mountjoy Road and Gorton Road. And again, the address is listed there in the report. The recommendation then is to approve the application for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 11 conditions. So I'll just take you through the details now, members, on the screen. There's a lot of information, members, on the drawings. So if anybody wants to ask me to hold on and go through anything again, please let me know. So this is the junction then. If you look on the top right of the slide, you can see this is the approach down past the leisure centre, heading towards the traffic lights and adjacent to the vacant health centre building. So that red arrow then is you coming past the leisure centre down to the junction. And you can see the road will be widened out. There'll be 2 left lanes. 1 lane will go straight on, and one that will also allow you to turn right to go up towards the campus. The road will be widened out. There'll be a proposed shared cycleway and footway. as part of the scheme, and you can see that on the drawing, and there'll be a change then to the radius at the junction, which will be widened out. So now this is the approach then if you're in Oma Town Centre heading out towards the Grange, and you come up beside the vacant fire station. So you can see on the left hand side of the drawing then annotation there where the fire station is. So that'll largely remain as it is. There'll be a left and straight on the inside lane, and the right turn only then, as you can see on the screen. So there is an LA Avenue junction then. So this is at the Grange, and if you're coming down the Grange towards the existing traffic lights, you can see the road will be widened out. You'll have one lane coming in off the road, which will continue to remain as it is. You'll then have two lanes exiting Lisbon LA Avenue, and you can see there's a left turn lane, which will take you up towards Gorchin Road direction, and the middle lane then will be to go straight on or to turn right. As part of that, there will be a footpath then provided along the top of the road widening works, and that's shown by the red line. And you can see it extends in along the side of the existing avenue. As part of that, members, then that roadworks, the widening of the Lisbon LA Avenue junction will result in the loss of the trees that are along there. So the right-hand slide then is a picture of the trees in full leaf in the summer. I'm sure members know them well. And you can see on the left-hand slide then, the red dots are the trees that are to be removed. So you have those shown on the screen. And they will be replaced then by the green circles, which are new planting within the Grange Park. And that's mitigation then for the loss of those trees. The actual junction itself then, that's an aerial view looking down on top of the existing junction, and you can see it will be upgraded to be a signalised junction. There are improvements then to the pedestrian crossing points, and the radiuses of some of the crossing points will be improved, and the junction, as I say, will be signalised. So we then move up past the Lisbon LA Avenue junction, heading up towards the campus itself. You can see on the left-hand side, there's the two arrows, two blue arrows, so that'll be two lanes of traffic heading up past the Grange. The other two lanes then are coming down, as it is at the moment, so you have those two lanes coming down towards the town centre. On the inside of above the blue arrow on the inside, you can see there's a proposed 1.75 metre buffer strip, and that's a green strip with the footpath then on the other side of that. I'll come on to that in a second. So if you continue then up past the vacant police station, that's the road, a cross section through the road. So you'll have two lanes coming down, two lanes going up. On the left-hand side, you'll have the tree planted area, and then the shared cycleway and footway on the left-hand side. So if we continue on up past the police station then, past Woodside Avenue, you can see then the cottages are at the bottom of the slide. So again, still two lanes of traffic going in each direction, with a new lay-by then created in front of the cottages, and that's shown by the red line. That's a 1.8 metre lay-by for cars then that can park along the front of the cottages. You continue on up the road and you can see the existing Puffin crossing point is to be retained, and the bus shelter will be relocated, and that'll be determined then at a later date with roads and Translink. Continuing on up the road then, you'll have that approach. So you'll have on the right hand side, you have the parking bay. Outside the cottages, you'll have the two lanes of traffic going down, two lanes of traffic going up, and your grassed area and your lay-by, along with the cycleway and footway there on the left hand side. So as you continue on up, as I say, past the Grange, that left hand of that slide really is the end of the Grange Park area. So the two lanes then will converge into one lane. So you can see the blue arrow then will continue on up for traffic, but the inside lane will have to filter in and join in with the other lane. Coming down the road, there's two lanes at Killybrack Road. So if you continue on up to the right-hand side of that slide, you can see then the bus lane starts, and that's a proposed traffic bus lane which will operate between the hours of 8 and 9:30 and 3 and 4:15. And that's bus lane then. You can see the red arrow is the bus lane, the blue then is the cars then, and the black line is the cars coming back towards the town centre. So the red and the blue will continue on out towards the the new campus direction, past the Arvley School entrance. And continue on, as I say, past the entrance into the school. And I've turned this slide around, remember, just for ease of reference. So you're coming up from the left-hand side again. You can see the red arrows, the bus lane, and the blue is the cars, and the black then is a single line of cars heading back towards town. You get to the blue line that you can see there annotated with end of bus lane, and the buses then and the cars will be able to join the same road. So there'll be 2 lanes of traffic from that blue line up to the junction, where the traffic then will go round to the left-hand side where the green arrow is. So that's then, if you come up the Gorchin Road, you can see, as I say, the green arrow as you going around the corner onto Strathroy Road. So there's a left turn really as you come up there, and that traffic will go around to the left. There's a straight on, go towards Gorchin Road. So the traffic will turn left and go into a single line of traffic and head towards the car parking area within the campus. Again, at the top of the slide there, you can see just above the green arrow, the Strathroy Road itself, there'll be 2 lanes then coming out. So they'll have a right turn and a left turn lane, and changes into the footway and cycleway there. Again, the junction will be signalised with pedestrian crossing points, and a footway then will be retained. So again, a key issue in relation to the application is obviously the road widening will result in the loss of the trees. I'm sure members know them well. So that's just some slides showing the green spaces there at the moment. You can see the slide on the left then shows the traffic coming down and the single lane going up. So you will have an extra lane going up on the inside, and that results in the loss of those trees. Again, then as we move on the right-hand slide, you move further up the road, those trees will all be removed. And then that's the view then as you look back from the sort of Silver Birches direction, looking down towards the town centre, you can see those stand of trees. And as I say, they will all be removed to facilitate the development. As mitigation, the applicant has provided a drawing showing the trees that are being removed in the red dots, and those will be replaced by the green circles along the new green space between the footpath and the public road. And you can see the annotation at the bottom. Overall, the amended landscape proposals have allowed for an increase in the number of trees. The original submitted scheme proposed 44 trees. The amended scheme now proposes a total of 58 trees. So there's 38 along the roadside and 20 within the Grange Park, thereby providing significant benefits and improvements to the landscape and amenity of the area. So members, as I say, the recommendation then is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report, subject to the 11 conditions.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we have an opportunity for representation from Ms. Jennifer Morgan from Department of Education representing the applicant, and also Ms. Karen McShane from Kevin McShane Limited representing the applicant's transport consultant, and also Mr. Matthew Crothers, Tetra Tech, and that's consulting, and the agent there for the application as well. So in your own time, we have 10 minutes allocated to this part of the meeting. So maybe I will flag up when we approach the last minute or so, but in your own time, just go ahead and maybe just introduce yourself when you speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for affording us the opportunity to address you. I'm Matthew Crothers. I'm Town Planner with Tetra Tech, and I represent the applicant, Department of Education. We're agent for the planning application. I'm joined with Ms. Jennifer Morgan for the applicant, and also Ms. Karen McShane, who's the transport consultant on the project. And I think Jennifer will, I'll hand over to her shortly so she can have a chat to you just around this. But just by way of some background, you'll recall that the application was previously presented to the Council's Planning Committee in October 2020, and it was deferred to allow for further consideration of issues and queries raised at that juncture. These included some technical matters in respect of scheme design and impacts in relation to landscaping and loss of trees. Following that committee meeting, the applicant and the design team submitted further information in respect of the need for the proposal and how it's required to assist improve traffic movement and flows in this part of Oakland, and also to assist in facilitating the operation of the Stroll campus. In addition, the design team reviewed the proposed development and made a number of amendments. These included the relocation of the grass verge planting area in order to separate the road and pedestrian footpath, cycle path, thereby providing a barrier and greater separation distance between traffic and pedestrians and cyclists, similar to the existing arrangement. This seeks to provide improved pedestrian safety. The amended scheme also confirms the use of the traffic lane across the site frontage as a dedicated bus lane, thereby minimising drop-offs along that part of the lane. The redesign of the pedestrian crossing area at the corner of Old Mountfield and Gorchin Road has occurred, and this allows widening the pedestrian area. This has allowed for footway widening and new pole locations for traffic signals, which is an improvement on the current situation and that of the originally submitted layout. This is going to provide a betterment through provision of a minimum of at least 2 metre footway width at the crossing at this location, improving pedestrian safety. We've also proposed an amended landscaping scheme, which Darren had run through with you there. And this came through consultation with Council's own biodiversity officer. So the amended landscape proposals will allow for an increase in the number of trees proposed for replanting. The original scheme proposed 44 replacement trees, but the amended scheme now proposes 58 replacement trees, and that's made up of 38 along the roadside and 20 within Grange Park. Again, these provide significant benefits and improvements to the landscape and amenity of the area. The anticipated growth rates of the chosen semi-mature replacement trees will quickly establish themselves early on from planting, and any localised effects upon visual amenity will be quickly reduced as the proposed landscape and replacement tree planting matures, thus ensuring no unacceptable visual impacts in the long term. As such, a scheme now before committee sought to address the issues and concerns previously raised and provides a significant betterment and improvement from that originally submitted. We're obviously very pleased that Council's Planning Department has now recommended approval of the application. I'd like to thank Council's planning officers for their efforts in progressing it to a positive recommendation. And if I may, I'll now pass you over to Jennifer Morgan for the applicant who would like to address the committee.
I am Jennifer Morgan. I'm Stroil Camper. To be honest, I just wanted to take a moment.
Sorry, Jennifer, just hold a second there. We're just not getting your voice clear enough in the chamber. I don't know if your microphone can be moved closer.
Hear me now?
It would be still too faint at the minute, you know.
Jeez, I can't see. There's an issue at my end.
Definitely.
Try turning your volume up, Jennifer. If you turn your volume up, it sometimes increases the microphone.
Is it full volume?
Chair, we can hear Jennifer. I can anyway from my end, maybe, so it must be in the chamber. So it's unfortunate, unless you want to jump to the next speaker. And I know we're constrained to time with people hopping on and off, but
Yeah, we could maybe move to the next speaker. IT is going to have a check on our chamber connection here just to make sure. But maybe if the next speaker, Ms. McShane, could go now, maybe.
Well, indeed, can you hear me okay?
I can indeed, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the key issues the last time was the roads and transport, and a lot of work has been carried out with the AFI in demonstrating the need for the development. And the scheme that has ultimately come forward ensures that the necessary works have been provided to accommodate all modes of transport to the site. So there's enhancements in the pedestrian, cycling and the public transport infrastructure to the site. And really that was all that I wanted to add to what Jennifer was going to say. So if you want to try handing back to Jennifer to see if you can hear her, otherwise we're available for questions.
To be honest, can you hear me? Sorry.
We can hear, but it's quite faint.
All I was wanting to do is really thank, obviously the planners and the members for really reconsidering the application, and to let you know that we are out tender for the main works contract if there's members who are on that at the minute. So I'm delighted to say we're at full tilt on Stroil. We're no longer in suspension, and I again just really want to express thanks and on behalf of the programme for the scheme again. I think it's critical to the success of the camp. Look, I'll leave it there, seeing you can hardly. Just leave
Am
it.
I right to say the gist was really to thank the members for their consideration
Yes.
and also that you were ready to go out to tender sort of as we speak?
We're currently out for tender.
Yep.
Yes, we're out for tender.
Okay, thank
Thank you.
you're out for tender at the moment. Yes, of course. Yeah. No problem. Well, apologies, the sound hasn't been great, but if you're content with that, we'll maybe proceed on. Thank you, and thanks to all our speakers. We've kept within the time. We do have an opportunity for anyone that might have any questions. Councillor Deehan.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Darren, for your report, and to Jennifer, Karen, and Matthew for their contribution. My question, Chair, really is around traffic flows. So perhaps maybe Karen might be able to advise. We are all aware that there will be 6 schools on the Struhl Shared Education Campus site, and many of those pupils will be delivered by bus, and you have made provision for a bus lane and so on. I'm just a little concerned regarding the volume of traffic going from the town centre out along the Mountjoy Road up the Gorchin Road, and I note that for the outgoing traffic initially there are 2 lanes, and then there is a bus lane, and the main transport lane is just 1. So I just really wanted reassurance that that 1 lane there is sufficient to cope with the flow of traffic, given that there will be many parents dropping off children, and we are talking about a lot of children. And I'm also conscious that distal to the turn-off for the Strathroy Road, we also have another primary school, Christ the King Primary School, and we have a number of large housing developments and businesses out that way. So I just wondered if I could have reassurance that your traffic modelling shows that the retention of 1 lane there is adequate to prevent a build-up of traffic backwards towards the town centre. Thank you, Chair.
Are you happy enough for me to come in?
Yep, go ahead. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Councillor. A very good question. There was a full detailed transport assessment carried out in support of the application, and this was vetted by both the department and their own external consultants. So we're all content that the capacity has been maximised as much as possible to accommodate the movements. In relation to the buses, the bus park accommodates the 35 buses that will be coming to the school. So one of the reasons for changing the lane to a bus lane during the school operational period is to ensure that we've got the certainty of the journey time from the existing bus station up to the school, and give priority to the public transport movements. The analysis that was carried out also considered the Strathroy Link Road and the introduction of that new bridge down to the Derry Road. So you've got the 1 lane coming out of town that currently exists along Mountjoy Road, but you've also got the lane coming out from the Derry Road across the Strathroy Link Road. So you've effectively got 2 full lanes coming to the school. As well as that, you've got the other extension of the Gorchin Road, which will bring traffic in from the country direction. But all of that was taken on board in the transport assessment, and we've deemed to maximise the capacity and to give priority to the buses coming up to the school as the main priority.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen, for that clarification. I think that's important because Omagh is a town which is known for traffic congestion, and certainly whilst I really welcome and look forward to the full opening of the Struhl Shared Education Campus, I just am a little concerned regarding the circulation of traffic, particularly at busy times. So thank you, Karen, for that clarification.
Councillor McLahry.
Thank you, Chair. Most of mine have been addressed by Councillor Deehan. It was mainly how the traffic coming west, coming out of the school campus, is going to be accommodated. There doesn't seem to be any way for them getting across and turning back towards the town and then dispersing out the other side of the town. I mean, everything going towards Newton Shirt can go out the bypass. Everything going towards Vintna can go out a bit and then back again. But it's the traffic coming towards Dromore and places like that. How's that going to be facilitated coming out of the school campus? Is my question.
Maybe another question for Karen, is that right?
Okay, I'll happily pick that up. What we have is there's a number of accesses onto the new Strathroy Link Road. So what we have accommodated is you can come out of the school, turn left, head down to the Derry Road, and then head out towards Derry. You can also come out of the school. There's a right turn lane out of the car park, which allows you to turn right down to the new traffic lights at the hotel and to turn left to head out into the country direction, which I think is out towards Dromore. And as well as that, the signals have been introduced to allow that right turn to be easier managed, so that we can actually come out and allow the traffic to easily turn right and head back into the town centre. So again, all of that was considered in detail in the modelling exercise that was assessed by the department.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Councillor Feely.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And that seems to be okay about the roads. I'd never like when if two lanes merging into one lane, as in one place there, just always create a lot of backlog with traffic and that. But I was just kind of coming in on the trees, and I know it's not very nice to be cutting down nice mature trees like that. But I know we have to do it to get this road widened, which will be a good job. And I see there's one of them blew down today, so maybe they might be that safe anyway. So I was just thinking, what kind of trees are we planting again? I see here there's not going to be different types than what's there before. Are they going to be much the same? I just wonder what kind of trees we'll be planting instead of the ones that's there.
If I can try and answer that one, Councillor. We've had discussions with Council's biodiversity officers just over the past year or so when we've been relooking at the scheme, and just to see what species of trees we could put in there. So as part of the updated landscape proposals, we're proposing to use sort of oak trees instead of common oak throughout the scheme, and the use of native cherry trees, rowan, and some black pine trees. The discussions that we had with Council's biodiversity officer, they acknowledged and understood that in the case where trees are to be planted along the roadside, the replacement trees, species choice is going to be limited to those that will sort of thrive within smaller spaces and also provide amenity and biodiversity value. So that sort of narrows down the types of trees that would go in there. So originally there were London plane and silver lime trees were chosen for that, but as part of the amended proposals, they've looked at some new types or different species. So they're looking at hazel and pear trees to be put in along the roadside, and it's been determined that they're sort of the most suitable species for roadside planting, and that they're likely to thrive better than what were previously proposed. Again, I know there's a number of black pine along the road there, but those will be incorporated where possible within the park as part of the new planting scheme. So there's generally a mix of trees now proposed as the replacements.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Any other questions at this stage? Nobody's indicating. I'm going to maybe at this point just ask our planning officer, would he like to make any comment in relation to it?
I have nothing further to add, members.
Okay, members. So we have a recommendation then. Councillor Flaherty.
Chair, I propose we go with the officer's recommendations.
Okay. Councillor Coyle.
Thank you, Chair. I've read the report and I'm happy to second the recommendation to approve.
Okay, members, are we all in agreement? Okay, all agreed. Thank you, members. And thanks indeed for those who took the time to make representation on this application. Just ask Darren to sum up.
Yeah, so members, the recommendation then on LA 10 2018-0969, recommendation was to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report as subject to the 11 conditions. Members have granted planning permission subject to those conditions.
Okay, thank you. So application number 3.
Chair, just my hand up here, Mary.
Sorry, Mary. Sorry,
You're okay,
Councillor.
you're okay, Chair.
Hardy.
Just to say, I think the previous speakers acknowledged their thanks to the officers and ourselves, and just say we appreciate that. And I want to acknowledge their patience, and I think we've got to the right outcome today. Too, thanks to all involved. And just, Chair, I have to pop out now for about 20 minutes, so hope to log off and return back to the meeting again. So, thanks to everyone. See you shortly. Thank you.
That's no problem, and I too want to thank the officers for their work. It is it's been a long running piece of work that's coming to fruition, and I do thank the officers, and it's an important improvement to the infrastructure here in Omagh. Thank you, members. So application 3 then is LA 10 2021 0728F.
Okay, members, so application 3 then, LA 10 2021 0728. It's a full application by Terex for a factory building containing office space for 2 stories, assembly and storage space, associated landscaping, car parking, and accesses then on the Beltney and Gillygooley Road. The location then, as you can see, is northwest of the roundabout junction connecting the Gillygooley Road and the Beltney Road in Omagh. The recommendation is to approve the application for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 12 conditions. I'll just take you through, members, then on the screen some of the details. The aerial photograph then shows the location of the site, and you can see the Gillygooley Road down at the bottom of the red line, the Derry Road roundabout, as it's commonly known then, and the Beltney Road down the right-hand side. The application site includes the whole of the area within the red line. However, that is not all being developed. I'll come on to that in a second. So the Omagh area plan then has designated the area as an industrial zone, and you can see it's part of a wider area of zoning, shown by the purple colouring. On the right-hand side then is the application site then, and you can see the relationship to Terex, and this is one of the reasons why they have applied for this site. They have looked at alternatives and discounted those as there is a need to be beside their existing site. So as I say, the red line includes a large area of the field. However, a significant portion of that is affected by flooding and is within the flood zone. So the left-hand side shows the block plan, and you can see the grey is the location of the building. You then have the lighter shaded grey, which is the area of built hard surfacing around that building, and the car parking then to the side. The green then is the existing field. The blue slide then on the right hand shows the flood maps, and as I say, you can see a significant area of this site is affected by flooding, and the area up beside the road is not. It's out of the floodplain. However, part of this development does cross over into the blue area and will be affected by flooding. Just in relation to some of the other issues then, so this is a block plan. You can see the location of the building then. The Gillygooley Road at the bottom, and the Beltney Road then is on the right hand side. The constraints of the site then, an arrangement has been created that goods and vehicles will arrive at the site along the Beltney Road heading from the Omagh direction. So you'll be coming from the Derry Road roundabout, you'll come up the Derry Road and you'll slip in then on the blue, the dotted line, or where the red arrow is. You'll then go round a one-way system, goods in and out, space for vehicles to park. You go on round, you have the parking then for the workers, and you then continue on out that one-way system, and you have the goods out. So the vehicles turn left and go down to the Derry roundabout again. So in terms of the floodplain, if you put that over that arrangement over the floodplain, you can see the access then coming in off the Beltney Road at the right-hand side is within the floodplain. That goes around. The blue is continual floodplain, and the car parking then with the yellow star again is floodplain. The building itself, though, is outside the floodplain, and the exit then out on the Gillygooley Road at the bottom is also outside the floodplain. The building itself then is unusual shape and form. It's a unique building specific for the company, and they have given a design brief setting out how they've come to the overall appearance and design of it. There are 2 elements to it. You have the offices at the front, which is the pink area, and they'll be over 2 floors. And then the blue is the assembly and storage area at the back of the site. And then that's the drawing showing the visual impression of the front elevation. As you can see, a unique building, and as I say, the design brief does go through and sets out why the building is designed the way it is, and it's to reflect the company, Terex, and also the nature of the work that they carry out. The artist's impressions then, or the visual impressions of how the building will look on the site. Again, a unique bespoke building, sitting on a proud site, very dominant as you approach in and out of the town. The landscaping then along the edge of the site will take time to mature. So for a significant number of years, you will see the building sitting proud on the site. However, it's a very unusual design and as I say, it fits in well in my view with the rest of the surrounding area. The other view then shows the offices on the left-hand side and the production area at the back, again with the unique design and appearance to it. And from the Gilly Road, you can see the offices on the right-hand side and the production area out the back. So rather than a bog standard rectangle box made out of cladding, it's a high-quality bespoke building and will create a sense of identity to the area. Finishes then of that are composite metal cladding panels, and the windows then will be aluminium curtain walling system. So the recommendation then, members, is to approve for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 12 conditions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Irvine.
Thanks very much, Darren. A very comprehensive run through as usual. Thank you very much indeed. I made the comment off air there, but I'll make it on air. It is a very unique design. It looks more like the Sydney Opera House. So are we becoming very cultural, I suppose, in our approach to buildings here? That is to be applauded. That said, I think it speaks for itself, and I'm happy to go with his officer's recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElduff.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to second Councillor Irvine's proposal, and just to acknowledge the huge role that Terex play locally. You know, engineering is one of our key economic sectoral strengths, and Terex is a huge player in terms of exports, in terms of employing people, and this is a good news story. And the officer described the building as a high quality bespoke building. So again, to commend the design as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And Councillor Deehan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, you know, the fact that part of this development is located within the floodplain, the car parking area, and also the entrance to the building. And I just wondered, could I have a comment from Darren regarding that? And, you know, are there any mitigations that are proposed? Is it acceptable that we should have this in the floodplain? And secondly, then, I know this land is zoned for industrial building, but there are quite a number of residential facilities quite close to it. And I just wondered about the impact of this development on the surrounding environs, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, members. So the issue of flooding is comprehensively set out in the report on page 7. And I'll just raise some comments from it. The factory access, as I say, is within the floodplain. The development will cause displacement of floodwater due to the effect of land raising, so to get the access into the site. And there will be compensatory reprofiling of the lands to accommodate this. So that has been discussed with DFI Rivers, and they have agreed in principle the idea of mitigation and compensation to accommodate the floodwater that will be displaced. They've also looked at the design and the hydraulic models, etc. So there has been extensive work done by the applicant in connection with DFI Rivers, and that issue has all been agreed with a condition on it that the mitigation has to be carried out. In terms of the car parking, again, top of page 8, the internal access road and car parking are to be developed at the existing ground levels, so there'll be no displacement of water. Whilst it's not preferable to have a car park in the floodplain, in the event of a flooding incident happening, the cars can easily leave the car park, so they will not be affected by the flood water that may come. There is measures in place, obviously, to alert anybody that has parked in the area to move their car, because obviously they don't want to get it flooded. So there's no issue in relation to that. The planning policy PPS 15 FLD1 has a presumption against development in the floodplain, but for the reasons listed within the report and set out, the application is considered to be acceptable for a variety of reasons. So there's no issues there. In terms of the noise, again, within the report, it sets out the noise, and the council planning department has consulted with the environmental health department colleagues, and they have replied that they are content with the building, subject to the design measures that are being incorporated. And that relates to the nature of the materials that the building shall be constructed in. And condition 10 covers that. So there's paneling, there's roller shutter doors should be closed, etc. And there's no external testing of machinery, which I think is an important one, that the machines aren't sitting running overnight. So as I say, for the reasons listed within the report, both the flooding issue and the impact on the amenity of neighbours is acceptable.
Okay, thank you for that, Darren. Are you content with that, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Darren, for highlighting those mitigations to the committee, and just to say that taking into account those mitigations, I'm happy to support the approval of this planning application, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposal and it's seconded in support of the recommendation to approve. Are we all in agreement? Agreed, thank you.
Okay, members, so the excuse me, the recommendation then is to approve the application for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 12 conditions, and members have granted planning permission subject to those conditions. Just one other issue, members, it's not related to the determination of the application, but you'll be aware there's a statutory requirement that any major application which the council proposes to grant planning permission for, contrary to a significant objection from a consultee, we would have to notify the department. In this case, DFI Roads advised that it would prefer access from the Gillygooley Road, with the new infrastructure then on the Gillygooley Road to serve the development. These proposed plans and this revision to the Gillygooley Road would be problematic and require a significant amount of new infrastructure, so it hasn't been pursued by planning officers. The proposed arrangement that has been pursued and has been presented to you today, DFI Roads, as you'll note from the report, are saying that will prove problematic in designing an appropriate and safe access. So there is some negotiation still to go on with Roads in relation to that, but I'm content that that can be agreed, and it's a technical issue that doesn't require it to come back to committee. In relation to the granting of permission, contrary to the comments of Rose, the view of officers would be that this is not a significant objection by Road Service or DFI Roads. A significant objection is an extensive or important challenge or disagreement. Roads have said they would prefer the access coming off the Gillygooley Road, which in the view of officers is not a significant objection, and therefore we wouldn't be notifying the department or have any need to do that, and we would be progressing on issuing the approval subject to sorting out the access off the Beltney Road.
Okay, I trust we're all in agreement with that as well. Thank you. Okay, so members, moving on then to application 4, and that's LA10 2020 07660, and we do have, sorry, that's okay. We'll move on and we'll ask Darren to introduce the application.
Okay, members, so application 4 then, LA10 2020 0766. It's an outline application for a new dwelling, and it's really in substitution of our previous approval for a dwelling under 8480 and 1025 reserved matters. The applicant then is Mr. Keown, and the location then is on the Lochside Road. Recommendation is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the conditions. The application is a local application, members, but you'll note from the report that it attracts material objections from a statutory consultee, and the officer's recommendation then is to approve. As a result, the application must be determined by the planning committee, which is why it has been brought to you today. So the application site then is the red line on the screen, and you can see the applicant owns the red area in red plus an area in blue, which is additional lands to the sides. The previous approval then, so the 848 outline and 1025 reserved matters approval, has been granted by officers and granted permission for the new dwelling in the location shown by the blue arrow. So access will come in off the red line, off the public road, along the private laneway down to the house, which is in the position beside the blue arrow. You'll see over the yellow star, remember there's a rectangle, and that's the location of the listed building which is near to the site, and that's the issue that really is before you today. The previous building that was approved, the front elevation is shown on the right-hand side of the slide there. So the proposed plans then, the road is shown with the blue line, with the black arrow, the new private laneway coming into the site, and that's in the same position as the previous approval. The house so has been moved across, so you can see it's now on the other side really of the rectangular shaped plot, and I've identified it there by the red arrow. Again, the listed building is the yellow star. So just to show you the issue really is that the application site has moved from the red rectangle over to the other side of the plot. If we take an aerial photograph, you can see the approximate location then of the approval in the red rectangle, and they're looking today to move it over to the blue square. The listed building then is the yellow star up at the Lockside Road. So you'll note from the report, members, that the key issue really in relation to the hazards and constraints around the site is that there's a listed building nearby. PPS 6 is the relevant policy, with policy BH11 stating that development affecting the setting of a listed building will not normally be permitted if it adversely affects the setting of the building. Development proposals will normally only be considered appropriate where all of the following criteria are met, and it lists A, B, and C. The consultee then, the statute consultee, Department for Communities, has replied, and their comments from the screen, members, and I'll just go through those with they have assessed the proposal against the requirements of the SPPS and PPS 6. And if you look then on the basis of the information provided, HED, which is the consultees, consider that the proposal has an adverse impact on the listed building and its current form fails to satisfy the policy requirements of BH11, of PPS 6 and the SPPS. They continue then that they would refer to the policy and the two paragraphs within the policy, and you can see 6.28 and 6.31. So 6.28 states the setting of a listed building is often an essential part of the building's character. This was particularly the case where domain, landscape, parkland, garden or grounds have been laid out to complement the design or function of the building. The economic viability as well as the character of listed buildings within such planned settings may suffer where inappropriate new development isolates them from their surroundings or degrades their landscape setting. This can effectively rob such buildings of much of their interest and the contribution they make to the local countryside. In 6.31 then, the extent to which proposals will be required to comply with the criteria BH11 will be influenced by a variety of factors. The character and quality of a listed building, proximity of the proposal to it, character and quality of the setting, and the extent to which proposed development and the listing building will be seen in juxtaposition. So the applicant has submitted a supporting statement, and I'll put that on the screen now, members. You can see the blue line in is the road, and you have view 1 at the top, which is a red arrow looking in towards the listed building. And then at the back of the listed building, you have view 2, which is the view out from it, looking towards the application site. And they've submitted these two drawings or sketch drawings. So view 1 then is the view looking from the road in towards the application site. And it shows the listed building and the landscaping then around it. And view 2 then, if you recall, if you're standing at the back of the listed building, looking out to the rear fields, that's the view then. So listed building, I'm sure some of the members will know it well. It's a very high quality design and appearance listed building. A thatched cottage sitting close to the roadside. And then you can see the boundary trees and hedges surrounding the site. So that's the location of the listed building, and is the yellow star just to the left, the rectangle. And you can see it's the thatched cottage is sited close to the public road, with the existing garden around the thatched cottage close into the building, and it's established by mature trees and hedges. The proposed site then is at the rear in the next field, so it's outside of the actual garden of the listed building, and it's in an agricultural field at the rear, and that's shown by the blue square. From the approaches along the Lockside Road in both directions, there will be very little, if any, views of the new building, subject to conditions. So therefore, there'll be no visual impact on the countryside and the wider landscape. The listed building then, critical views of it are from the frontage, and when you're at it, the landscaping around the site does screen the building very well. You will see a building out to the rear. However, the view of officers is that the separation distance The existing landscaping and additional landscaping that can be proposed will ensure that it will not harm or adversely affect the setting of that listed building. So the recommendation then, members, is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 18 conditions.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and propose the recommendation with the officers and propose the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor McLahry.
So I'm tending towards agreeing with Councillor Philly. But is the site fallen? Is that land level? I know the cottage, but I just can't remember. Or is it dropping away? Is that ground dropping away down from the road? Is there, what's the contour? What's the drop? Or is it just level?
It's relatively level. There's some undulation in the fields, obviously, but to be honest, if you look at that slide, you can see the fields out to the rear, to the left of the building, so it is relatively level.
And are the hedges, the traditional hedges, going to be maintained in its current format?
So the application site will not touch or affect those boundary hedges and trees around the common boundary. It won't be affected. The application site, show there, so you can see the application site. It's actually annotated on it, existing hedges and trees to be retained. That can be conditioned, and additional planting can be put on if you want, members, as part of this within the application site, but no, those trees and hedges will not be removed.
Yeah, I think they do screen the house adequately, and apart of that, if that can be made a condition, then and if Anthony was agreeable, then I'd be seconding that proposal, because I don't think the new build takes anything away from the existing listed building with that screening there.
So condition 15, just it states a landscaping scheme shall be submitted along with the reserved matters. It includes a survey of all existing trees and hedges together with details of those to be retained. And then additional planting will be put in there, remember. So if you want, an additional condition can go on specifically stating that those trees and hedges should be retained. That's the standard condition will go on most approvals. Yeah.
You're happy with that, Councillor McLahry? And would you be happy to second Councillor Feely's application proposal? And is everyone else in agreement? All in agreement? Okay, thank you.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, members, so the recommendation then was to approve planning permission. Members have granted planning permission subject to the conditions within the report and an additional condition to retain the boundary hedges and trees along the side of the site and in the interest of visual amenity and protect the setting of the listed building.
Okay, so moving on then to application number 4. Sorry, apologies. Agenda item number 4, and that's to consider one delegated file called in for decision by the planning committee. That's paper B for your information. And we do have speaking rights from Mr. Ken Moore representing the agent for the application, and we will bring Mr. Moore in due course. So we'll ask Darren to introduce the application now.
So paper B, application number 1 is LA 10 2021 0703. It's a full application by Mr. Greenaway on the Bow Island Road in Kesh, and it's for the erection of a 2-story replacement dwelling and attached domestic garage with the retention of the existing dwelling for domestic storage purposes. The recommendation then is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the one reason. On the screen then, members, is the site location plan. And you can see the public road at the top of the slide, the laneway then coming along the red line down to the application site, which is at the centre of the slide. Additional lands in blue within the control of the applicant. Block plan then shows the position of the house, and you can see it then at the bottom of the slide. And then the green box and the green rectangle is annotated as existing dwelling to be used as a domestic store. House itself then, a modern design house. It's well set back off the public road, so there's no critical views really of it to any great extent, and it's acceptable on that basis. So you then have the original dwelling, and you can see there, while partially overgrown, the dwelling exhibits the traditional architectural features of these small buildings in the countryside. And you'll note from the report then, members, that the key issue is that that building was replaced with a post-war subsidy dwelling, which now stands at the front of the original dwelling and farmyard. The policy states under CTY 3, in cases where the original building is retained, it will not be eligible for replacement again. And that's the issue before you today, that the original building has already been replaced by the post-war subsidy building. That post-war subsidy building has been replaced itself by another application. So the issue, as I say, is that the original building can't be replaced again because it's already been replaced before.
Okay, so we're going to ask now and welcome Mr. Ken Moore to the meeting. Ken, you're very welcome. You have 10 minutes to speak to the committee in support of the application. And just in your own time, go ahead. I'll give you a shout whenever you've reached about 9 minutes.
Can everybody hear me and see me?
We can hear you fine, yeah. See you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. I just want to briefly run through this or cover this under 3 headings: the background, the policy, and the case itself. In terms of the background, when the applicant first engaged with us, he advised me of his desire to replace, yet if possible retain, this old original stone-built late 18th century cottage dwelling. I advised him of the provision within the replacement policy, encouraging the retention of existing structures where they can be incorporated in an imaginative way into the overall design solution and helping to retain a visual link with the past. He was, of course, very happy to accept my advice, hence the submission of the current application. In terms of the policy context for the consideration of this type of replacement dwelling is CTY 3, and it has been outlined by the Council's Planning Department that all policy criteria have been satisfied, with the exception of the matter in front of the committee, in that it is alleged that planning permission has been previously granted for the replacement of this dwelling, therefore not eligible for replacement again. Policy CTY 3 of PPS 21 does indeed refer to this situation, and I'll come back to this again in just a moment. The case itself, if I can explain, during the processing of the application and on request, I submitted additional supporting information to clearly demonstrate that the subject building was historically a small stone-built late 18th century thatched cottage, and that the structure on the site exhibited the essential characteristics of a dwelling as required by the CTY 3 policy. This was fully accepted by the Council. In my supporting statement, I happen to refer to the post-war dwelling which stands to the front of the original dwelling and farmyard, suggesting that it replaced the original early 18th century cottage. In fact, more recent investigation estimates this dwelling to be of pre-war construction rather than post-war, with later post-war improvements. My reason for this inclusion was based on a throwaway comment made by the applicant, William Greenaway, when I first met him on site over a year ago. William only assumed this. It made some sense that the occupants of the original cottage may have moved into the later constructed dwelling. His comments, however, were based on pure speculation without any proper evidence, as both dwellings lay vacant when he purchased this small holding over 30 years ago. William, very sadly and very unexpectedly, passed away with COVID just a few weeks ago and is not here today to add anything further in this regard. His son, Alan, who is beside me here today, doesn't have any further knowledge of the history of this small farm bought by his late father. My reference, therefore, to the replacement post-war dwelling was based on pure speculation, made in the context of attempting to clarify that it looked as if this additional early 20th century dwelling replaced the living quarters of the original 18th century thatched roof cottage. It was a further means of assisting to demonstrate the historic residential use of the old cottage, but my comment was not based on any hard evidence. On checking with the Council's Planning Department, there is no historic record of planning permission ever being granted for the replacement of this dwelling, with records going back as far as 1973. It is estimated that this original cottage, stone cottage, dates back to around 1780 to 1820, with the later dwelling built in the early 1900s, long before current planning records began. The Council's claim in the reason for refusal that planning permission has been granted for the replacement of this dwelling is, in my opinion, totally unsubstantiated, with no records or evidence to back this up. A further check by myself with the Northern Ireland Housing Executive also revealed no record, and long before their time. Going back to the CTY3 replacement policy, I would respectfully suggest that this policy, when written within the context of the Planning Policy Statement 21, dated June 2010, rightly so states that no other dwelling replaced under this current policy be eligible for replacement again. That, of course, makes complete sense under the current policy. However, this, in my opinion, does not include dwellings that were replaced prior to PPS 21, and certainly not those dating back some 200 years. It is interesting to note that the policy, including the SPPS, remains silent on historic replacements granted prior to PPS 21. So, to close, Chairman, the genuine circumstances of the case have been clearly outlined, including clarification of my reference in my supporting statement to the later replacement dwelling. In my opinion, it is wholly unreasonable to assess this application against current replacement policy based on an unsubstantiated comment made by the late applicant, which seems to be the main reason for the Council's recommendation to refuse planning permission. There is no record or hard evidence from either side to demonstrate that this old 18th century cottage was ever replaced with the later built dwelling, nor is there any evidence of planning permission ever being granted. More likely, and typical of the day, it was an additional dwelling built of its time to meet farming family needs. I hope, Chair, that this clarification will allow members to understand the genuine circumstances of the case, support the late applicant's family, and, in the evidential context, approve the application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. And just before proceeding to put up for question on behalf of the Planning Committee, I would like to offer condolences to the family, to the Greenaway family, on the recent death of William.
Thank you, Chair. I will pass that on to the family.
Thank you. So we have an opportunity now, members, to ask the agent any questions in relation to the application. I don't see anyone indicating. John, your mic's live. You okay?
Sorry, thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor McLahry.
Ken, just to clarify, we have a 18th century, late 18th, early 19th century cottage on the site, and then we have possibly an early 20th century cottage on the site as well. There's a full report on the on the old cottage that is to be retained. Does the applicants, the family, own the what's deemed to be the replacement, and what's their intentions with that? And what way is it constructed? I mean, is it could it be made habit? Could it even be turned into something you could live in?
First of all, Chair and Councillor, the applicant owns all of the property here. It's associated with a 30-acre farm. And I'm just unclear as to which dwelling you are referring to, Councillor, there. Are you referring to the original cottage, or are you referring to the later sort of early 20th century dwelling?
It's the earlier or the later 20th century one. We have a fairly extensive coverage of what the earlier building is, but there's not much to say.
Yeah.
I mean, type of construction. I mean, what it is, and also what is the applicant's intentions for that building if they did get planning permission?
With regard to the later 20th century dwelling, when I spoke to William on site, it wasn't his intention really to do anything with it. He did refer to the fact that it may well be, he may well improve it, he may well renovate it, or indeed he may well demolish it. But there was no sort of suggested firm intention as to what its future use would be. It also is a stone-built dwelling, and it's in a very uninhabitable state. And certainly, as far as the late applicant was concerned, he placed more value on the little building that we are now replacing and incorporating into the design solution, rather than this later 20th century dwelling, which he didn't consider to be of much merit. And it was also his intention, if at all possible, to move the entire development, if you can call it that, further away from the road. And therefore, he's not here to speak for himself, but certainly at my time, there was no suggestion as to what future use the existing 20th century, early 1900s dwelling would be put to. More likely, it would be perhaps improved, renovated, or indeed demolished altogether.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members while we have the agent connected? And nobody is indicating, so at this point, I would thank Mr. Moore for addressing the committee.
Thank you,
And
Chair.
move on now to any comments our officers may have.
No members, just happy to take any questions if you want.
Councillor McLahary.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, my questions lead on, Darren, from the obviously the questions that I've asked Mr. Moore. Basically, the planners are saying that the stone cottage was the existing building, and this other building is the replacement dwelling. Well, that's not clear. Was there further planning permission received to replace that dwelling?
So maybe if I could clarify, so you have the original old building, which we call Building A.
Right.
You have then the post-war building, if you want to call it that, although it may be a bit earlier. So that's Building B. The application before you is to replace Building A. And the argument, the comment in the report is that that Building A has already been replaced, and it resulted in Building B. Okay. Building B itself then has been replaced separately and has planning permission granted on it for the replacement of Building B with the new house.
And obviously that's recent.
Yes. Now that Building B and that recent approval isn't really relevant today. The question and the issue before you members today is you have the original building, Building A, the very first building. He's looking to replace that. And the view of officers is it's already been replaced and resulted in Building B. So you can't get another house to replace Building A.
So the only if we separate them and say Building A was one building on the farm and then Building B was a further building for perhaps a younger section of the family.
Yeah.
then that would make the new one not. The previous one wouldn't be a replacement of A,
Yep.
and this one here would be the replacement of A. So,
Yep.
so we have to decide now. Is that what we're trying
Yep.
to
So the
separate?
issue- yeah,
Whether we separate them or not?
Yes, essentially. The issue is, as the agent has said, the issue here is that the approvals are historic, so they're before 1973. So we don't have a planning permission showing building A granted planning permission to be replaced and building B built as a replacement. We don't have that. And the argument that the agent is making is that the policy says that you will not be allowed to replace a house again if planning permission has already been given to replace it before. So in other words, you don't get building A and 2 replacements for it. The argument that the agent is making is that building A wasn't replaced to become building B, and that it's included in his comments because it was a throwaway comment by the applicant at that time. And I think the case being made to the agent is that building B is on its own an approval in the countryside and doesn't rely on building A.
Is there any way we can get evidence from historic rates collections or anything to show that there was different families or both were being rated at the same time? Is there anything we can get that shows evidence to support, or was that up to the? Is there anything we can do to do that?
Yeah, well, certainly a deferral, you could go and explore that, all members, but I think the agent has looked into that, as he mentioned, the housing executive, and there's no records there. I think it's an unusual case that I've never come across in my career, and that's why I'm interested to hear what members think of this. And if it arises again, we will rely on this in the future. The evidence before you is what I always harp on about, and I always come back to you. What evidence is before you? Nobody has been able to get a planning permission or a decision notice which says building A was replaced and building B was built as a replacement of it. As I say, the agent is making the case that in the absence of that, you can't say building A was replaced and building B. You give building A on its merits.
So now the last question. Sorry, Darren. I'm making myself sound stupid here, I think. I don't have to try hard. If building B had been, whenever a replacement application was made, if it had been demolished,
Can I cut across you? I wouldn't do hypotheticals.
Don't do hypotheticals.
The facts
Right.
before you. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so I have to stick to the facts
Yeah.
before me. Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it to somebody else to ask some more questions before I come back to this.
Councillor Irvine.
One idiot followed by another idiot, I think. In the absence of firm evidence, Darren, this is what we're saying, is our fallback situation that the presumption is that the existing 18th or early 19th century building was indeed replaced by the 20th century building. It's immaterial to a certain extent whether it's pre or post-war. It's of more modern construction. It's within close proximity to the original cottage, and the original cottage is left standing. Is that the presumption?
Just to confirm you, so you're saying that the assumption is that building A, the original building, was replaced with the new building, building B?
Yes.
I don't think you can make that assumption because we don't have any evidence of that. There's no planning permission to say that. I don't know. I've tried to find out, but I don't know what the planning policies were back in those days, whether you didn't get a house in the country unless you built another one for it as a replacement, or whether farmers, for example, got houses in the country back then. I don't know. I say the issue's raised because the comment was made that building B is a replacement of building A. And that's what really members for you today to decide is this such an old, even if it was replaced, it's so old and historic that it's neither here nor there, and you're content to allow it to be replaced again, if you want to use that expression, or are you content that on the basis of what the agent's saying today, it never was a replacement and the building A has never been replaced?
But I think what we have to decide, I think you're slightly in a quandary, no evidence exists or has been found to date to prove and also disprove, I suppose, is the other side of the coin. We'll deal with it one. To prove that building A was indeed replaced in the early part of the 20th century with Building B. But on the reverse side, there's nothing to discount that it wasn't. Is that the assumption or the presumption, the road that you're travelling down?
Both facts run in parallel with each other, and they're correct.
Yeah, that's right, because it's part of the same coin. The question I would ask then, I suppose, related to that is, what use currently, and this is current evidence, is Building A being used for?
It's essentially a nil use, Councillor. It's that old it wouldn't be, in my view, really habitable, but it remains a dwelling, and there's no issue in respect of it being considered.
No, you miss the point, because if I presume, I'm not going on presumptions, if it's not being used, therefore I want to discount that it wasn't being used for an alternative use. In other words, it was turned from a dwelling into a stock holding house or something like that. It hasn't, there's no evidence of that.
It's like any old building in the countryside. It may have been used for storage from agricultural products and things like that there, but inside it still has the appearance of a dwelling house.
Right.
So I wouldn't get too concerned about that.
I understand the policy context. I'm just trying to go down all the dead ends as possible and withdraw myself back onto the main road. Thanks.
Okay, members, who's next? Councillor Riley? Councillor Riley? Oh, sorry, apologies. Councillor Riley was in fact staring at the light.
Thank you.
Pressing
Now,
my mic on and
I
off.
full capability of making a comment now. Chair, I suppose my comment here is that we find it difficult enough to decide on the evidence that we can find to decide on policy and applications today and in the present. I think that if we are to start guessing what may or may not have occurred some 100 years ago, I think we get into the realms of pure speculation. And for that reason, Chair, I don't believe that this falls into the policy that says you can't have a replacement within the policy, because it's clearly, to my view, outside of that policy. So for that reason, Chair, I'm happy to make the proposal that we grant permission on it. Thank you.
Okay, and my apologies again. You know what I was doing? I was pressing my mic on and off, thinking I was putting his live. So.
And I'm always willing to let you know, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Maguire.
Well, again, I'm reading the recommendation just as it is set before us today. The proposal is contrary to the policy CTY 3, Planning Policy Statement 21, Sustainable Development in the Countryside, in that planning permission has been previously granted for the replacement of this dwelling, and it is not eligible for a replacement again. Have we any evidence before us today that planning permission has been previously granted for the replacement of this dwelling?
No.
So why, how did we come to this recommendation? Chair, you know, the recommendation is put before us to make some sort of a judgment, and it is a fairly complicated one. But actually what it states there in the recommendation, in that planning permission has been previously granted for the replacement, with absolutely no evidence before this committee. That's strange now. I have to say, in all the years we've been on the planning, as I say, we're well used to speaking about things that happened 100 years ago as political heads about here, but to speculate on to refuse a planning application, which to me does not seem to have any sustainable reasons to oppose it, with this recommendation is worrying. It's the first time I've seen it, and obviously we must disregard that recommendation at 8, because there is no substantiation to what is stated in there, that the planning permission has been previously granted. And I don't care how good we are at second guessing laws and things that might have happened and didn't happen, and we all have our different versions of history, but to put that in front of us. I'm not satisfied with that recommendation whatsoever. I don't think it can be sustained. It's based on an assumption, and we've had a few planning applications where we've said that we know what an assumption does. It makes an ass out of you and an ass out of me, that old chestnut, and that's what that does. And I'm quite happy then, in that case, to second Councillor O'Reilly's proposal that we grant this planning permission against the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, so members, just to clarify why this issue has come about, and again, the agent has commented on his speaking rights. You can see on the slide the photograph of the building. It says it was later replaced with a post-war subsidy dwelling, and that is why this issue arose, really. And as I say, I've never come across it before, members, and we're interested to hear as officers what you think of these situations, and we will learn from this and take it going forward. So I'd like to thank you.
Okay, members. So hopefully that clarifies, I suppose, the reference to the replacement in the absence of evidence or against the reference to it being replaced was taken as taken from the applicant in this case. Our members, Councillor Deehan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Chair, I absolutely accept that we must judge these planning applications on the evidence that is presented to us. And from my position, I can see no evidence that Building A was replaced by Building B. And accordingly, therefore, I wish to support Councillor O'Reilly's proposal that this application should receive approval contrary to the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, members, so we have a proposal and it's been seconded to approve the application contrary to the officer's recommendation. Are we all in agreement? Agreed, yeah. Just ask Darren to sum up.
Yeah, members, so the recommendation then was to refuse permission for the one reason. Members have decided to grant permission contrary to the officer's recommendation. In relation to conditions, members, can I suggest the power to sort of word those as delegated back to officers? Conditions would be standard conditions in relation to the replacement dwelling condition, that the original building is not used as a dwelling, it's ancillary to the new house, retention of the landscaping, and a time condition then just for the works to commence.
All agreed, yeah?
Thank you.
Agreed, Chair.
So agenda item 5 then is the schedule of planning decisions issued in January 2022. And that's paper C. You're all, sorry, Councillor Irvine.
Yeah, it is me, unlike Councillor O'Reilly. I'll propose noting. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Coyle.
Second, Chair.
All in agreement?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6 then is the report on planning enforcement in January 2022. That's paper D. Just for noting, members. Councillor Irvine.
Happy to note again, Chair. Thank you.
Note. Councillor Maguire.
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, all agreed. Item 7 then is the report on planning appeals in January 2022, paper E, and Paul's going to take us through that.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So moving on then to agenda item 7, and that's a planning appeal update for January 2022, paper E. And the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on one planning appeal decided by the Planning Appeals Commission during January 2022. And the council reference for that application is LE10 2020-1235F. And the appeal is against the non-determination of an application for permission to develop land without compliance with conditions previously attached. And the development is to retain mining-related surface infrastructure development without compliance with condition 41 so as to allow a period of 5 years for the completion of decommissioning restoration, and that presently is 3 years from the date of its commencement. So members, the lands is approximately 165 metres west of 45 Camcozy Road, Colonel Correspondence, and the appellant is Dalrady and Gold Limited. And members, just to note that this decision is an interim finding, where Commissioner Daly found that the appeal had been submitted in time and was valid appeal. And just in terms of summary then of the decision, the appellant had lodged a non-determination appeal. So that's an appeal where the council hadn't came to a decision on a particular application within the required time limit. So the appellant lodged a non-determination appeal. And the Commissioner's interim finding as part of that appeal is to decide whether the appeal is valid. And her decision, Commissioner Daly found that the appeal had been submitted in time and was a valid appeal. And you can see the details of that set out in the report, both in terms of the timeline and why it was a valid appeal and a valid application submitted. So members, just to note that now, after this interim finding, then we'll move on to the appeal stage where statements of case will be submitted. And given the nature of the application, those statements of case will come before the committee. So members, there were no costs associated with this application or the appeal, and just the report, just for noting, members, the report on appeals. Thanks.
Okay, members, that's for noting. Councillor O'Reilly.
Just, Paul, I'd like to make a comment on the length of time.
So in terms of the time limits, you'll see it there within the middle paragraph. So in the case of an application for development, which is a major development, the period is 16 weeks for us to come to a decision on an application. So the application was submitted on the 27th of November 2020. And there was no extension agreed for that time limit. So the 16-week period then would have took us up to the 19th of March 2021. And in accordance with Article 20, the appeal then was submitted to the Commissioner on the 9th of July. That was within the 4-month time limit then for the appeal. So the Commissioner was happy that the time limits were complied with.
Okay, would you be happy to note, Councillor O'Reilly?
Yes.
Happy to note. And seconded by Councillor McClahary. Okay, thank you, members. All agreed there. Item 8 then is to note the publication of the NIAO report on planning. Paul's going to speak to that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And moving on to item 8 then, members. This is an audit report by NIAO, and it's in relation to the review of the Northern Ireland planning system. And members, just to note that a comprehensive report will be brought back before the R&C Committee in March. And that report will look into the key findings of this audit and the recommendations, and review any specific commentary in relation to our performance and processes. In terms of reports, just summarising the report's key findings, members, you'll see on page 49, the system is increasingly financially unsustainable, and there is a widening gap between income and expenditure in terms of planning and delivering the planning system. The system is inefficient and often hampered by poor quality applications. There is an urgent need for improved joined-up working between organisations which are delivering the planning system, particularly critical of silo working between consultees and the department and councils. And that reference, members, is page 47. Many statutory consultees are struggling to provide information in a timely manner, and members will be aware that matters come before us on a number of occasions. And the system isn't meeting its local development plan making objectives in terms of delays and timescales. suppose, members, there is an overall concern in relation to planning performance, and there's many challenges that officers face in their daily duties. And maybe just to draw attention to recent difficulties in terms of the existing planning portal, which has been down for a number of weeks over the past 4 to 6 weeks. And it would be the intention, I suppose, it is now up and going, but it would be the intention that we would write to the Minister and sort of ask for a detailed explanation and time limit of what happened and what measures were put in place, and potentially how they're going to address performance that was impacted during that time, if members were content with that. The report goes on then, members, to make a series of recommendations which relate to all the planning functions, and also recommendations in terms of processes, planning fees and leadership and ammonia levels. I suppose, members, just to try and draw out some of the comments, summarize some of the comments in relation to our own council area. You can see there on page 30, in relation to major applications, the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council sit at top of the performance table. On page 37, there's concern raised about the delegation rates across councils, with some councils having a delegation rate where officers are taking decisions, and that's less than 90%. But in terms of our own delegation members, in 2021, we have a healthy over 95% of decisions taken by officers. On page 38, there's particularly critical some planning committees appearing to be excessively involved in decisions around new single homes in the countryside. And our own council area and committee do have the highest percentage in this regard. Now, I think that's a reflection of the fact of our district, and that our district's one of the most rural councils in Northern Ireland, and also a reflection of the current planning provisions within PPS 21, which we don't believe makes sufficient provision for non-rural dwellers in our district. And members will be aware that we've tried to address that through the draft plan strategy. There's also concern raised regarding the percentage of decisions taken contrary to officer recommendation, and that's on page 40 and 41. And again, I just refer back to the percentage of delegation. 95% of decisions taken by the council are taken by officers. So I think the applications that come before committee are a smaller number. They're more finely balanced and more contentious. And in reality, the committee, in reviewing the officers' reports, the detailed reports that's before them, are entitled to come to their own conclusions in those cases. So, members, as I say, that's a summary of the report, and a more detailed report will come back before the RNC committee in March. Thanks.
Okay, members, thank you all for that summary of the report. There's certainly a lot of plenty to consider ahead of March as well. Kim, did you want to speak at this point?
Thanks, Chair. Just to advise that this report has been considered by the Public Accounts, the Northern Ireland Assembly's Public Accounts Committee. They've already received and heard evidence from the department in respect of this report, and they will be receiving evidence, I think, tomorrow from local government through SOLAS, and our old Chief Executive will be part of that delegation to the Public Accounts Committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McElduff.
Hi, very interesting report. Good performance levels from this council, which is great. Well done to everybody concerned. I suppose my concern would be pages 38 and 39 and 3.11. And, you know, we're guilty, found guilty of a little bit of rural challenge, you know, on occasions. And I suppose for that, I wouldn't like to enter into the spirit of an apology. You know, to be perfectly honest, all said it diplomatically, perhaps as an officer might, you know, that it's reflective of the rural character, perhaps, of this district. But again, you know, no apologies from these benches for trying to get houses for the people where appropriate and within planning guidelines. Thank you, Chair.
Are you happy to propose the noting of the report?
Not happy at all, but I'll note it. I'll propose the noting of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Irvine?
I'm slightly dismayed at this report in regard to the overgeneralization from the NIAO in regard to referrals to committee. I think on the one hand, we have the greatest form of delegation, and yet probably on the other hand, as an individual council, we bring more into the committee for scrutiny. And I think Councillor McAuliffe-Barry has quite rightly highlighted, we are a rural district council. We're the largest rural area and the most underpopulated. We rely heavily on agriculture for support, and our people actually do that. There is a connection with the countryside here, and that is why people actually try and squeeze as many houses as possible in the countryside, because that is their prime area of choice for going to. I think if the analysis went into the amount of discussion, probing, and I suppose critiquing of the policies, I think our council would be at the head of the game as well. I know other councils, when they actually bring it into committee, seldom go into the type of depth of discussion, critical observation, probing both of our own planning officers and applicants and agents in regard to the decisions, the rationale for the decisions, and actually looking at the policy in more depth. So I don't have an apology for this. I just have questions for the Audit Office in regard to how they actually took on board the facts presented to them and how they actually processed and looked in depth to come up with an analysis like this. I will second the proposal for noting, but I'm not happy to do it either. And if there's any chance that the Audit Office want to actually come and talk to the committees that actually make these decisions, that may have been a better approach rather than taking written evidence and then doing a third-party analysis of it from a distance. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Okay, that's been noted. And did our officer mention correspondence that from the department here? Just double check.
Yes, just also I'd mentioned members the difficulties with the planning portal this last 4 to 6 weeks and the impact that that's had on planning performance as well. Just the daily challenges that officers encounter. So it'll be the intention to write to the Minister requesting a full explanation of what happened and the timeframes, the delays, I suppose, in getting the portal back up and running. And obviously this has had implications in terms of issuing decisions for applicants. So we sort of, if members were content, we would write to the Minister and request clarification.
Councillor Maguire?
I'm going to carefully happy to make that a formal proposal of the committee, that we do write to the Minister seeking an explanation.
Thank you. And Councillor Feely?
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, I'll second that.
And we're all in agreement with that proposal and the previous one. Yep. No dissension, all in agreement. Thank you, members. So item 9 is correspondence. And again, Paul will take us through that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Item 9, members, then that's 2 pieces of correspondence from DFI. Item 9.1, and it's, I suppose, timely in terms of the NIO audit as well. This is correspondence which relates to the report on the review of the implementation of the Planning Act 2011. Members will be aware that there had been a consultation that occurred in February and March last year, and the Council had submitted a detailed reply with a number of recommendations across all the planning functions, local development plan, development management and enforcement. And members, you will see that the report is concluded with 16 recommendations or actions, and that's set out in paragraph 12.12, pages 28 to 30, and then a more detailed consideration in Annex A. Initial concern, I suppose, from looking at the report is that there's no timescales or no timeframes in terms of implementation of those actions or recommendations. And again, members, it's just to note that a more comprehensive report will come back before the RNC committee in March, looking at the 16 recommendations and reviewing these in the context of what we had suggested as part of our reply to the consultation. And we'll update members at that stage. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. I believe the department's having a problem in itself in that it's since 2015, it's 6.5 years since the devolution of the primary functions around planning that were devolved to councils. The department basically is taking an overall strategic role in regard to planning, but also has its hands dipped in to looking at the functions, the higher level functions of council. The problem is they set KPIs, performance indicators, and sort of timescales for the functions that the council carry out. But they don't seem to actually put any KPIs down or timescales for those functions that are left with them for them to deal with. I refer particularly to one, the called-in application of the major retail scheme that we have sitting on our books. There is absolutely no indication, and I think it's referred to later, when they're actually going to come to a decision, whether they're actually going to call it in for determination by themselves or whether they're actually going to go forward. The other area, and we're currently sitting it in, is within the regard to the independent examination for a local development plan. Currently, Belfast City Council, I believe, has had the report from the commission who led on their IE, sitting with the department. I'm led to believe that it's with them this past 7 months, and there's absolutely no forward movement on it. I expect that when we go through the process, and again, thank you, Paul, to you and the team and everybody else that's leading on that, along with Conor Braddon, I think, our barrister, you're doing an excellent job, but we could be in the same boat. Where is the equity in that? In that we have our ratepayers and people who live in our district area breathing down our necks, saying we were promised a new planning system that would be implemented within one mandate, in other words, 4 years. We're now going into the back end of the second mandate with no likelihood of achieving an end goal. Probably it will be towards the latter end of the third mandate. Where is the department in all this? And they're talking about probably lack of resources. Well, sure, the councils are hit by that. What do? We actually employ additional resource to actually process things. And yes, we find the money from somewhere. What are the department doing? Would they get off their backsides and do something? Because we're getting the blame for it all the time. Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry for being so vociferal. Thank you.
I think totally agree there. I think you captured the mood of the committee as well. Councillor Maguire.
Yes, and just to concur with what Councillor Irvin said there in relation to the performance of the department, and just for clarification, that particular planning application was not called in by the department. It was brought in as I think formally held, I think is the term. So on question the timescales on that application previously, in relation to the fact that I was given led to believe that if the department calls in an application, there is a 3-month time limit. But if they put it on hold, as they did in this instance, that there's no time limit. And on an inquiry into what was happening in relation to that, I was informed that when the department is snowed under with call-ins with the 3-month time limit, they simply move them to the holding position, which means, just as Councillor Irvin says, we are getting criticism back for our statistical performances, but when we start to scrape the surface and indeed question what was the point in giving us the whole planning responsibility for our district when we make a planning decision, the department comes down, sticks a hold on it or calls it in, and then it sits in abeyance for months and months, possibly years. And as Councillor Irvine says, we as councillors get it in the neck, and obviously are lobbied after the event as to why is it taking so long? Who do I go to? Do I go to MPs, MLAs, whatever? And we have no response because the department has just put them in a press and closed the door. You know, that's totally unsatisfactory, and I think we need to highlight that in response to the department, because it's frustrating. We deal with planning applications where our performance is as good as any other council area, but yet in these tricky planning applications where we have done what we are expected to do, the department can just step in and stick it in a cupboard and close the door. That to me is unsatisfactory. They must be held to account by a time limit of some sort. Now, 3 months for a large department in Stormont is surely good enough for them to review planning application. And as I think we're all aware, there hasn't been that many from Ananoma district that they've had to either call in or put a hold on. So I think the least we could expect is a timely response from the department, and maybe question the department as to why they move their time limits and take the easy route out, while we have people in our district waiting to make major investments in our area with the knock-on impact of employment and all the rest of it, and all we can do as local councillors put our hands up. We can't do anything about it. You know, we're totally frustrated by that. And as I say, it doesn't happen that often, but like one of those planning applications would mean a lot to the area I represent, and that's where I'm at.
Okay, Councillor. And Councillor O'Reilly.
Thanks very much, Chair. I totally agree with the previous two speakers there. Can I seek some advice from officers or whomever? Maybe we have to get legal advice. Can we legally take a case against the department to challenge that ability that they seem to have granted themselves to put things into a holding pattern and buy themselves time? Now, we continuously get that it's being looked at and it's going to be nearly a decision, all the rest of it, but that's months and months. Surely somebody should have a challenge made there that pushes them to make or give a time limit in which they can have a hold on applications. So we know it's 3 months if it's calling. We would like to try and establish a time period on a hold. Because otherwise, not alone this council, but every other council that is supposed to have the decision-making powers and abilities end up in abeyance, and they have no idea whether they are being able to take decisions or not. And I think that fundamentally flies against the, if not the letter of the law of the devolving of planning powers to councils, but certainly the spirit of it, in which fully accept if it's a regional application that has merit there, that it can be looked at again and see if we are in line with regional sort of aims and objectives. But certainly to hold something, Chair, I believe is just unreasonable.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, we do have Philip on the call at the moment. So what I would propose, first of all, though, while Philip maybe thinks about that, is just to bring forward item 9.3, other correspondence, part 2, which is the mixed use, the Uniport site, which we've moved on to effectively anyway, and just cover that. So it's paper, you have the copy attached there. I'll just ask Paul to summarize that correspondence from Department for Infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And that's item 9.3, item 2 on that, which is correspondence from DFI, the Chief Planner, in relation to the Uniport application. And members all recall, and we've discussed it at length now, that back in the committee in December, we had resolved the right to the chief planner in relation to that, the holding direction, requesting a time frame in relation to their consideration of that call-in. And you will see from the letter dated the 14th of February there from the department that they're currently finalising their consideration, but at this stage is still unable to give a precise time frame for the completion of that process. Thanks.
Sorry, maybe if Philip was available, we could maybe get a response to Councillor Riley at this point, if possible.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's an interesting question, and I must admit I don't have the answer just here in front of me at the minute. The department does have a statutory power which allows it to put these matters on hold, but the question is whether or not that power should operate without limits. I think it's an interesting question. I'm happy to take a look at it and try and provide some advice to the committee for the next meeting in relation to that particular point. And if it goes beyond my level of competence, then the committee can make a decision as to whether or not they wish to obtain some further advice in relation to the matter as well.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Appreciate that. All happy with that approach. And maybe could I propose her, I suppose, to note that correspondence and the two previous emails from DFI as well. Councillor Irvine and Councillor Coyle. So just moving on then to correspondence back up to 9.2, which is from the department, which is from DAERA. Well, there was an orbit of correspondence from DFI, apologies. And that was in relation to planning application conditions. So that's just ask Paul to speak to that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And yeah, there's plenty of correspondence. This is item 9.1, item 2, and members. This is correspondence from Alistair Beggs, who's the Director of Strategic Planning Directorate, and you'll just note the deadline for applying. This is the 7th of March 2022. And the correspondence relates to planning conditions, and that's planning conditions on the department's decisions, not in council decisions. And you'll see in the correspondence the varying types of conditions there that's mentioned. The main issue here, members, and what's been suggested, and if you review the conditions, the suggested conditions pass responsibility for future submissions in terms of discharge of condition applications and reserved matters applications. So these conditions will pass responsibility for future applications to councils in terms of the department's decisions. And justifying that approach, members, the department refers to the PAC and when they allow an appeal. But I suppose in my mind, the PAC is an independent body. We have a very specific role for appeals, and that's not really comparable. Members, my advice is that the council should be resisting this. These are applications which are regionally significant and very contentious. And this will result in officers having significant additional workloads, which are resource intensive and essentially not generating a fee income for the council. So, members, I'd suggest that we would resist this vigorously. Thanks.
Okay, members. So certainly I'd be supportive of our officer in that regard. Again, more being pushed the way of councils and no resources really to support the work. Do we have a proposer and a seconder to respond in that vein? Sorry, Councillor Deehan, I just spotted you there online.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I will propose accordingly, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Maguire.
Yeah, Guru Margaret, Carly, just happy to second that we respond and take Paul's advice on that. Guru Margaret.
Okay, and we're all agreed. I will now move on to 9.2 then. Correspondence from the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And again, this is correspondence from the Dara Minister, and members will recall at the December meeting that we had resolved to write to the Dara Minister to request a meeting to discuss the decision taken by Dara to halt planning consultation prioritisation requests. And this was following correspondence with Mark Hammond, the head of Natural Environment Operations, which hadn't made any progress on that matter. Members, you'll see in the correspondence dated 1st of February that the Minister has declined the meeting and has suggested that there's measures are only temporary in nature and will be reviewed in February 2022. He also acknowledges that DAERA officials intend to engage with the Council on these matters, but just to note, members, that there's been no communication to officers at this stage. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. I made the proposal for this to be sent. I didn't make it for it to be declined, but it says it's going to be reviewed in February this month. So I presume they will notify us if that comes back, but I still make it clear that a meeting would be preferable in the future if this does, if this issue still pertains, next month. So if we'll look at it again in March 2022. Sorry, I propose to note.
Okay, proposed to note by Councillor Coyle. Councillor Rainey? I know what you're saying, but I can't hear you, Councillor Rainey. I think you're happy to second that, but
Okay.
I hear you now. Go on ahead there. Sorry, Councillor. I think Councillor Rainey's happy to second there. I did get that at the start from all modalities of communication there.
Okay.
So,
Here I am now.
I hear you now, Councillor. Yep.
Okay, I said I was happy to second that, and I also want to tender my apologies for being very late.
No problem, Councillor. Thank you. So that's proposed and seconded, and we all in agreement. All agreed. So item 9.3 then is Department for Communities, and that's the implications for the Planning Committee in light of the Heartland judgment.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, members, it's the final piece of correspondence, and it's correspondence from DFC, the Deputy Secretary. And again, members will recall at the December Planning Committee meeting that we had agreed to write to both DFI and DFC in relation to call-ins and express our concern. Express our concern in terms of the additional work and the delays to planning decision making, and that the call-in process will cause. And we had requested DFI and DFC to review the necessary legislation and work together in relation to identifying opportunities to remedy the situation. So the letter confirms that DFC are aware of the situation, and they're looking into how to address this complex matter, and they're also working with DFI in that regard. So I suppose it's positive in terms of that, members, but again, just to note that there's no timelines or timeframes for working through the matter. Thanks.
I suppose it's ironic that when we talk about performance and KPIs and everything, that's one of the trends of this meeting has been the lack of timelines altogether, let alone KPIs, the lack of timelines to begin with. Councillor Irvine?
Yeah, I'm slightly worried on this and that we're going to go into purge soon. And currently at the moment, we've no First Minister and Deputy First Minister, so essentially the executive can't meet. I think this is a holding letter as much from the officials that's going on. I think we have to press them and write back to them and just ask, we want a definitive answer in regard to what's happening, and see where we go, because it's not good enough. If the shoe was on the other foot they would be kicking us into the ground, right? Why are we letting them away? They are sponsored apartments. They've caused this complex problem, and yet they are saying that they're looking at it. Not good enough, not good enough. Resource it, get it sorted, and get it out. I think we write back and say we're totally dissatisfied with a lack of a timeline and the lack of urgency being expressed. When is it going to be fixed? Thank you. That's my proposal.
Councillor Coyle.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I will second Councillor Irvine's proposal. This issue needs to be resolved. You know, it's running now into the third month. You know, from this is going on, we need to have clarity. If the shoe was on the other foot, we would be pulled over the coals, and we would be, you know, we would be fined, or we'd do something like so. They need to get their finger out and get it sorted.
Okay, members, all in agreement with that proposal? Okay, thank you. Item 10 then is any other urgent and relevant business. Councillor McElduff.
You, Chair. I want to ask another general question, and I have been in correspondence with, the officers on specifics. But if this is a big issue everywhere, then it needs serious attention. I'm talking about developments where there might be land slippage during the development and land slippage after the development, and the failure of developers to honour their commitment to erect a retaining wall. I have two specific examples which I won't specify in the here and now, but I'm at a loss as a public representative as to how best to support people affected by this matter. Both are in Oma. And so I suppose my question is, what is the statutory duty on the council, various regulatory services, environmental health, planning, is it civil in nature, all that type of thing, to be of support to those residents who are at a loss. They walk through their place, it's a mess during the building, and there's even land slippage taking place. I can see it at the rear of one dwelling where things have slipped and moved, and people can't live in this state of fear, and developers not terribly responsive. Who holds them to account during the development, and who holds them to account after the development? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Does any of our officers want to comment there? All here?
Yeah, well, I can try and give you an answer in terms of planning, and Darren might have some comments as well. But like in terms of planning, I suppose we're looking at breaches of planning, and I wouldn't be able to comment in terms of environmental health or building control legislation. That would be a matter for those departments. So in terms of planning, like we would be looking whether there was any retaining structures as part of that proposal, what the gradients were, and whether that development, there was particular conditions on that development relating to those works, and then whether there was any breaches of that in the development that was carried out.
Okay, Councillor O'Reilly, not in there.
While I appreciate that answer, Paul, really doesn't take us much further forward. And could I press you then to sort of make comment, if possible, on that scenario with the developer gone bust and out of business for X amount of years, and that situation continuing, and nobody seems to be willing to take any responsibility for it. So I suppose if we are only given, and rightly so, I suppose, in this committee, a planning view on this, I would ask that maybe Kim would look at this from a holistic council point of view as to, if there is anything, or does this really, at the end of the day, boil down to a civil matter which can trickle on for years? But I certainly have an issue similar to what Barry has raised, but it's gone on for years in Newton Butler, and the developers out of commission now, so there's no redress there, or as far as I'm aware. Thank you.
Well, we can certainly talk to a range of services and bring a report back. What I would point to is probably if a site is in the construction phase, there would be a construction safety plan, and there could be a role for health and safety executive, and also in terms of insurances and bonds that would be in place for the development, but we can look into the detail of that. I couldn't comment at this stage on the situation where a developer was no longer in business. Would have to do some research around that one.
But I suppose this has always been an ongoing one, and over 20 years I've come across different sites that shortly after building subsidence happened one way or another, and we fought battles with developers to even toss the houses because they were left fenced round and in a dangerous condition, and kids were in playing and so forth and so on. So, like, I mean, you know, and they went to court to enforce the developer or the builder to actually take them down, you know, and they still lie to this day, many years later, as a vacant lot. But there is other issues that people's lives, houses subsiding, where their gardens have sank a foot. So you step out and you go a foot back down. Those developers are gone, and obviously the sewerage and the foundations, everything is affected there. Now, just so that we have an understanding, because at this stage, my understanding is to civil, and there's very little that you can take from once it, certainly, I would presume when during a building phase, there is some agencies that can step in and put a bit of enforcement in there. But once the bonding period's gone, or maybe once the developer's gone out of business, it's even more difficult. So just maybe if we can even take some legal on that as well, Kim, that we can at least, as Barry says, be able to go back and give some sort of a definitive, insofar as possible, response. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure maybe Philip would consider that as well, and maybe come back with his thoughts on it in a future meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, happy to do that. I do have some experience of it, both in a personal capacity and in my role for Derry City and Strabane District Council. It is primarily a civil matter, as Councillor Riley has indicated. There are some limited circumstances where there is a potential risk of harm, and where the land slippage is affecting the public road, where there can be some rules for statutory agencies, but it's primarily a civil issue. Specifically, it underlined the tort of nuisance. And we're then really into the issues of it being dealt with by house insurers, or within the first 10 years potentially by NHBC or some other bonding organisation.
Thank you, Philip, and thanks, councillors, for raising that, an important issue. Any further relevant business? Nobody is indicating. In that case, thank you all for your attendance, and I thank our officers. I also thank IT that facilitated our hybrid meeting once again, and wish you all a safe journey home as the weather